Balatro's the newest addition to the list of one-person dev team indie babies that's seen worldwide success. It's practically everywhere from Twitch streams and YouTube videos. It's so good, in fact, that they managed to sell over 1 million copies in nearly record time. Of course, with this much popularity and attention comes with the downside of scrutiny, and Balatro's not without its own design flaws. Tons of tweets have been made about said flaws, and they all have a point. This video, however, dives into possible alternatives. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty of this discussion, if you somehow haven't heard of Balatro and have no idea what it's about, here's Balatro in as few hands as possible. Balatro is a roguelike card game where you play hands of poker to reach a target score before moving on to the next blind. You do this 3 times per chapter, called an ante, increasing the target score every time. The stronger the poker hand, the more points you can get. You can also do some nifty things to stack the deck in your favor, like opening packs of cards to add to your deck, adding power-up seals to existing cards, changing card values and suits, and tapping into the game's Latin namesake by adding powerful jokers to boost your score. It's a great game that has an interesting design choice looming over it. The true benefit of this design choice is yours to decide, but one thing is for sure, Balatro would be forever changed by the addition of a score calculator. To loop you in, Balatro has a deliberate design decision of not including a score calculator. What do we mean by that? You are given a score preview of every hand of poker you play, but this does not include calculations of the value of each card in the hand, the bonuses you get from each special card, and the effects of all of your joker cards. It's simply just a hand that is tallied. Leaving it up to fate like this can mean the difference between narrowly making the target score or barely missing it by a few points. It might seem like a monumental oversight in a game with tight mechanics and well-implemented ideas, but as the creator revealed, the lack of a score calculator was a deliberate design choice. You are actually gambling just like you would in an actual poker table. The rush from seeing the points going up with all your synergies and the relief of meeting quota is all pretty intentional. But this becomes a problem at the higher difficulties. According to LocalThunk, the developer, at its core, Balatro is still a strategy game with a player base dedicated to squeeze every ounce of min-maxing from each of their runs, which is an understandable concern. Not providing the calculated score but having almost all information available to you would require just a little bit of legwork that we are sure the utterly deranged wouldn't opt out of computing. I actually can't help but idly compute my score sometimes. To quote LocalThunk, the game is more fun when you set up your Rube Goldberg machine and watch it go before knowing whether or not the hand will win the round. And he's right, everything in the game is set up so that the ticking up of the score is as dramatic as it can get before you reach your total. Your score combos can even catch fire with their intensity sometimes. Adding a score calculator here would go against this feeling and would probably put the cool flames to waste. The anticipation would be gone since you would already know the score and everyone would be rushing to skip to the next hand they need to play. Another thing that complicates this is the random element of some jokers. How do you account for that? Now, a suggestion that comes up often with this dilemma is to include a toggle, one that enables or disables a score calculator. This idea is already bad for a number of reasons. Players would simply turn it on. We can't underestimate how much players are willing to optimize the fun out of their games. Trying to play every run as optimally as possible can lead to repetitive and less creative runs. Which brings us to the video. Adding a toggle doesn't seem like a great idea, and keeping things the same is pretty much okay, but it still faces the same problem. This is why we have conceptualized a few ideas on how to alternatively approach this game design problem without encroaching on the gambling philosophy of the game. These ideas are mostly brain exercises in game design with their corresponding pros and cons. And the most important part is, none of us are game developers here, so take these ideas with a grain of salt. The idea goes like this. Whenever you ready a hand, a notification pops up that this specific hand breaks a certain threshold of chips. This can vary depending on what ante or stage of the game you're in. It could be just big text on the screen that it will definitely break past 1,000 points and not much more specific information. The strength of this would be for the more mathematically impaired. The brunt work of doing long arithmetic would be alleviated, but not completely. At least the bigger chunk of the score calculation is gone, and you are left with guessing the ballpark where the score will end on. A big problem with implementing something like this is the problem is still there. It may alleviate some unnecessary legwork in computing, but to the more hardcore fans, that's not even enough. You can find yourself in a situation where your run is so good you don't need to calculate your scores every time. Or your run is so doomed that no amount of optimization will help you reach your goal, score calculator or not. This solution hits a target demographic that probably doesn't care about this change, so let's move on to the next idea. we can add special jokers into the mix. Maybe a joker that allows you to see the score total if you have the joker equipped. It could be called the Oracle Joker to match the theme. They could look like they have some crystal ball that allows you to get pre-calculated scores. Another similar idea would be specific card upgrades like how seals in tarot cards work. An enhancement to a card where if you use the card for a specific hand, you will be able to see the total score. It might not be as strong as the other card improvements, but it adds another layer of strategy involved. These ideas work because they are seamlessly integrated into the whole ecosystem of Balatro. Relegating the calculator to a joker or a specific card upgrade might be too niche, and you could be giving up too much power in your run for something mediocre. When meant at crossroads for 2 upgrades, the score calculator upgrade for a card would be too low value to get. Upgrading your cards with multipliers or re-trigger red seals is almost always infinitely better, as you can scale your scores so high you don't even need to calculate if you would meet the quota. This brings us to our last idea. Do you know how your combo multiplier goes up in flames every time you hit a hypothetically high score? What if we add granularity to this effect? Introducing relative hand strength. Now, instead of the visuals we are used to seeing, what if we get bigger flames the closer we get to the target score? Or even a heat bar that fills up relative to the target. This is a non-intrusive way to display your hand strength or how high your total is going to be without more unnecessary information on your screen. It would probably even add to the dopamine hit you get setting up your chain reactions. The downside to this might be similar to before. A high enough score doesn't need calculating anyway, and an estimation isn't a need for those who play at higher difficulties. At best, this tool just helps them visualize how close their estimation can get them to the target. At its core, game design is a series of decisions. Each choice compounds into the others, and like a domino effect, come into this coherent ball of a unique experience you want to make. Make too many safe decisions and your game will come out generic and uninteresting. This is why you can see some games have a well-defined vision. At a glance, you already know what experience the player should get out of the game without the developers having to tell you. We all know Souls-like games and how they're difficult and tedious, but fill you with triumph when you do overcome a difficult boss. Or we know how about Stardew ports you into a cozy time chamber where it's comfy and relaxing and oops, 6 hours passed. But here's the thing, intended experience often clashes with the quality of the life of the game. Think of it as the spectrum of how accessible your game is. Quality of life makes it more accessible to a larger portion of the community, but it risks steering away from parts of the community and away from the game's original intent. This is why Balatro has an interesting dilemma, because the problem isn't as straightforward as adding a calculator. It's everything else designed around not having it that's the problem. A score calculator would remove the fun of hearing the score tick up and seeing the flames occur when you have a strong hand. Local Thunk made the deliberate decision to stick to his guns and ship out a game he would enjoy playing. A no-story, satisfying vibe machine with tons of mechanics and depth that is easy to understand and easy to pick up. He acknowledges that it is a curse of the game and it will always be an interesting case study on the game's design and game development in general. You can say it's in the levels of staying true to your vision as Hideo Kojima in Death Stranding. That game was unique and memorable because of it. Everyone hated the idea at first, but he still pushed through. But of course, it's always about knowing when to stand firm and when to address what your community is saying. Edmund McMillan, the guy behind The Binding of Isaac, was firm in not including descriptions for items in his game. He claims that this is akin to the older games like Legend of Zelda when no one knew what anything did. Years later, seeing his Binding of Isaac gamers play with a tab open just for item descriptions, he soon came to regret that decision as the game grew from 100 items to more than 700. In conclusion, play Balatro. What do you think about our suggestions? Do you have better ideas on how to handle this dilemma? Are there games that faced a similar problem and handled it well? Let us know in the comments. Game design is finding that balance between all of the layered decisions you make at every point of game development. You can't please everyone. Quoting the motto of Arrowhead Studios, a game for everyone is a game for no one.